There are a lot of good questions that this series poses, but so far nobody's asking the real question. What if Ant-Man defeated Thanos by shrinking and going up his butt? Why won't they talk about that? What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is What If Season 2, Episode 4, What If Iron Man Crashed into the Grandmaster? So this one was okay. It was obviously better than the last one, because don't think it could get much worse than the last one. I will say the biggest thing that impressed me for this episode was probably the visuals, and it's just because it was cool to be back on Sakaar and see some of the grand scale that we got to see in the race and all of that stuff. However, with that being said, most of the rest of this was just not that interesting. The idea of the story is fine. The idea that instead of falling back through the portal, Tony falls into Sakaar instead, and it's a few days after they stopped the Chitauri forces and all of that. I think it's a fine setup for a story, and then we get to see, because I honestly don't even remember the fact that we didn't get Gamora's story in the first season. But I like this concept. I think it's probably the most clever concept that they've had outside of what we saw with Peter and Ego in the second episode. The problem is they don't really do anything interesting with it. It just becomes Tony saves Sakaar by facing off against the Grandmaster in a race, and that's kind of it. And then he meets Gamora while doing that, and they stop Thanos. Okay, it's not that interesting when you think about some of the possibilities with, first of all, you've got these two big egos meeting each other. You would think there would be maybe a little bit more, personality clashing. It felt like there wasn't really anything interesting done with this idea, in my opinion. Talk about the voice acting real quick, because again, it's not really that good. I think Jeff Goldblum at times didn't even really sound like himself. I had to look up to see if it actually was him, because there were just a couple of lines that didn't feel like him at all. It felt like he wasn't even putting on any sort of character. He was just saying the lines like a normal human being, and we know Jeff Goldblum is not a normal human being. So it felt weird from him. I don't remember the name of the actress that plays his right-hand woman on the planet. She was terrible in this one. There was one line in particular that really stood out. And I know she's supposed to be kind of a bland character, so she's not supposed to have a whole lot of personality. But there was one line that sounded like she didn't understand how to read the line. Because they find Gamora after she broke out of her cell. She's asking if anybody knows how she broke out. And she reads the line exactly like this. Anybody? Anyone? It didn't sound like the proper inflection when you think about how anybody? Anyone? Maybe I'm weird in all of this. But that line and then most of the rest of her lines just felt like she was just reading lines off the script right in front of her. She wasn't actually trying to put any emotion or inflection into her words. She was just reading what was in front of her, and they just went with that take and said, let's go. And that's kind of the feel for a lot of them. Just some of them at least have a little bit of personality behind it. Like the guy playing Tony Stark in this one, he doesn't really sound like Robert Downey Jr. for the most part, but it sounds like he's at least trying to put some emotion. Same for like Taika Waititi as Korg, and I don't remember who plays Valkyrie now. I'll have to look up her name later. But she sounds like she's putting in some effort. So it was really weird that, I want to say Tabor, she was just absolutely not even trying, it felt like in this episode. I feel like the pacing for this was kind of weird as well. The first scene between Tony and the Grandmaster felt like somebody just put it on fast forward. Like they were just rushing through the lines, they were talking over each other, they were speeding through every word. It felt like we just had no time to deal with the two of them meeting. So I'm thinking, okay, I guess they're just trying to get through as much information as possible. But then you start off with the first race and you waste probably like 30 seconds on this joke where he's like, hey, don't go until I say, wait for. So you have time to make that joke instead of having time to, I don't know, show the first interaction between Iron Man and the Grandmaster, because that's more interesting for me. That is interesting to see how they would interact. Somehow he already knows about Tony's exploits on Earth because, I don't know, some weird space mumbo jumbo that they get that information, but he knows about that. And so it would be kind of interesting to see the two of them interact off of each other because of their big personalities, but they just sped through it. They put it on fast forward for us. I don't understand that. And there's several moments throughout where it just felt like we were wasting time for a joke when they could have been maybe doing something a little bit more interesting with the two of them interacting. There's one weird scene during the final race when the Grandmaster's coming around the corner and there's this big statue of him, and we have to spend like 10 seconds on him going, oh, and then winking at the statue, and the statue winks back at him. Is that supposed to be funny? Because that's not a joke to me. That's just, oh, look at that. He's full of himself. Isn't that just hilarious? No, it's not funny at all. Why are we spending time on it? The jokes in this episode were slightly better. I mean, they're better than the last episode, but they're slightly better than they have been so far this season. You had a couple that were decent enough. The joke about the paperweight was kind of funny. The joke about Korg talking about the people who go off to the bed and they lay him down 6 feet underground and then put the stone pillow on top. That was kind of funny as well. So there were a couple moments. Overall, it still doesn't really feel like a good, funny episode. It feels like the jokes are not even close to halfway landing. They're mostly just not grown worthy. They're just boring. They're forgettable jokes. And then the final thing, which is kind of a critique that I've had of Marvel since Endgame, is the action scene at the end with the final race is just real messy. I talked about a little bit in Secret Invasion where there were a couple of scenes where it felt like the direction wasn't there. Like things were happening and you could see the characters involved, but you don't know where everybody is in relation to the other characters. It feels like the editing just cut out some scenes, so we don't know how certain characters get to certain places. And this one, the race, it feels like you don't know what's going on. You see a bunch of explosions, you see a bunch of flashy lights and all of that stuff, but there's no real sense of where is everybody in the race, where's everybody in relation to each other, who just got blown up. There were like maybe 15 to 20 cars in the race, and I saw at least 30-something explosions about halfway through. There's still like 20 cars in the race. So it just feels like there's no real direction on how this is supposed to go. It's let's just put in a bunch of cars, let's put in a bunch of explosions, and it doesn't matter how many cars are actually in there because nobody's going to be able to keep up with what's going on. So we could just throw some cars in the background and nobody's going to care. But the problem is there are going to be certain people that do care. There are going to be certain people that do watch and go, everybody's being blown up. I just saw like 10 explosions right there. Why do we still look like we have all of the cars that we started with at the beginning of the race? It just feels lazy. It feels like they don't really want to put in effort to make it make sense. So they just throw it all on the screen and go, the audience isn't going to care. They're stupid, right? The people watching the show, they're stupid, so they're not really going to pay attention to what's happening. I don't like that. I don't like that from an effort perspective, because you should be putting effort into this. You should be trying to put care into it. But like I talked about in my Marvels review, it feels like a lot of post-Endgame has been just this lack of care. There have been a few exceptions to that rule, but for a majority of the projects that have been put out, it feels like it's just, we're going to put it out, we're not going to put that much effort into it, people are going to watch because they love Marvel, and that's how we're going to make our money. That's why I feel like the Marvel drop-off has been very severe, because I think the audience overall feels that lack of effort. And they've stopped caring and they've stopped wanting to go watch movies or even watch any of the shows on Disney Plus because they just are bored with it. So it's frustrating that we've gotten to that point, but all in all, it was a slightly better episode. It was at least an improvement on the Christmas one. Again, that's not much of a compliment, but at least it's something. So it gives me a little bit of hope that maybe we'll be on a slight upward trajectory for the rest of the season. But with all that being said, on to the next episode. I'll see you there. And now, episode 5, What If Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper? Finally! Finally some hope. Because this one addressed some of the issues that I was having so far with this season. First and foremost, we actually do get some continuation from the first season. And I think that's welcome. The Watcher does make a joke at the beginning that he doesn't normally do sequels. That's kind of necessary. They don't all have to be continuations of the first season. But I would have preferred if we could have seen some continuations. More than just the one that we have so far. Everything else feels like it's completely new. And frankly, if they had some good ideas before this, then maybe I could be a bit more understanding. But as it is, I think their two best ideas were sort of wasted. One, because they didn't do anything interesting with it. And the other one, like I said, for the Peter and Ego story, could have been continued from the first season anyway. But this is the first one where we actually see Captain Carter from the first season. We see where her story went after the events of what we saw. And I think it's a welcome change. I think overall the story is pretty well set up. There's some good emotion behind it, seeing Steve has survived all this time, but he's being controlled now. It's almost kind of her own version of the Winter Soldier story. with the longtime friend, in this case, love interest, who's being controlled by Hydra. But I guess in this case, it's the Red Room. I don't think they have any Hydra connections, but I could be wrong about that. But it was interesting also to see like an older Bucky who's now a secretary for the U.S. Something kind of fun about that little Easter egg too. Another big thing for this one was I thought the voice acting overall was pretty solid. I don't know the girl playing Black Widow in this one, but I thought she sounded a lot better than the couple of times I've heard her before, as far as trying to impersonate Scarlett Johansson and bringing some good emotion to the role as well. But Haley Atwell in this one absolutely killed it. Like the emotion that she brought to her role, really good. And it actually got me invested in this story as well. I thought Rachel Weisz as Melina was kind of, it was okay. It wasn't great. I thought the accent sounded a little wonky at times. It wasn't terrible. She did sound like she was invested in the role. So there's nothing god-awful about the voice acting in this one, which is just so nice after what has been a pretty poor season so far in that respect. But I think that just the emotion behind this episode is very solid. The sacrifice at the end with Steve and Peggy having to live with that, but of course she still thinks he might be out there. And it also finally gives us a bit of a goal for the end of this season. We see what might tie all these stories together. I don't know how this is going to work with this other version of Scarlet Witch, and I think that was Nick Fury that was there with her. I don't know what that story is going to lead to. It seemed like from WandaVision there was only one Scarlet Witch. There are a lot of different versions of Wanda out there in the multiverse, but there's only one version of her that is the Scarlet Witch. So I don't know how this is going to work with this version of her, if she's supposed to be another Scarlet Witch or if this is just another version of her that is a good person. I don't know. I hope we get some good answers from that. But it seems like what she's doing is outside of the Watcher's purview, which makes her pretty powerful, because the only other beings that were able to see him or do things that were outside of what he could sense was the strange sorcerer supreme or whatever that he was, that was so powerful he destroyed his universe, and then the Ultron that got the Infinity Gauntlet and could have control of basically all reality and time. So clearly this version of Wanda is going to be powerful. I just don't know what that means as far as what we've seen from her so far in the MCU. I don't know if they're going to start retconning some stuff that they've done before to make it make sense, or if they're just going to do something different, but I'm kind of hoping it's the something different, because I hate it whenever retcons happen. I think the action in this one was also better as well. Felt a little bit more focused, and some of that was just down to the fact that there were fewer people involved in what was going on. But I thought overall the fight scenes were handled and animated pretty well too. But I'm just really happy to actually have an episode that I actually enjoyed and felt like I had a good time with, because I wasn't sure if I was going to get that from this season. So it gives me a little hope. Maybe we'll see some improvement from here. But with all that being said, on to the final of these 3 episodes. I'll see you there. And finally, episode 6, What If Kahhori Reshaped the World? Oh, well, I'm flashing back to doing the review for Legends of Tomorrow, where it feels like these writers just want to be like, oh, what if we could go back in time and just rewrite everything so that the white man couldn't be bad? Okay. And what's sad is, like, that's probably the only thing that brings this episode down. Everything else about it was really cool. The visuals were awesome to look at. I loved the setup for it. But when it became about that, when it became about we're going to rewrite history in our fictional world so that the Native Americans get to keep their land, what are you doing? I guess in your mind, you're standing up and representing those people, probably, but you're not really doing anything for our world. So why make it about that? Why couldn't you just make it about this cool new Native American superhero, which, by the way, this is a new character, I found out. I was honestly wondering if there was a character that existed in the comics before this, but no, she now has her own comic series, which I don't mind. I don't mind creating a new character for that, but when you make it about what you made it about, I lose interest. Because now it feels like you're trying to make a statement and you're not. You're not really saying anything that hasn't already been said and is stupid, because we can't change history. We can't go back and rewrite what happened. Is it awful what happened to the Native Americans? Absolutely. But it happened, and we are where we are now because of those awful events. You either have to accept it, move on, and try to make sure that never happens again, or you just get stuck in the past saying, oh, we should change that. That's not right. It shouldn't have happened. What are you going to do? Time travel doesn't exist. We can't change it. Let's move forward, please. But the voice acting in this was fine. Was a little hard to get through the fact that they were speaking Native American language throughout the entire thing, so obviously I had to read subtitles throughout most of it, which in some cases I understand it, but in others it's very distracting because I'm not able to actually watch what's happening because then I have to read the words below. And I typically have subtitles on anyway, just in case I don't understand something that's been said. But I feel like most of the time it's more of a crutch that I lean on if I didn't quite hear what was said. When you have to read everything because you don't understand what's being said, it is a bit of a distraction. And it does feel like I'm looking down more than I'm actually watching what's happening. So a little bit of a hindrance there. That may not be an issue for everyone. But overall, I think the other issue that I kind of have with it is we started to get a little bit more of a focus at the end of last episode with that other version of Scarlet Witch taking Peggy Carter into her world. And now all of a sudden it just kind of went completely different. And now all of a sudden there's a Doctor Strange showing up at the end of this episode. And I don't know how this is all going to connect or if it is, but it felt kind of weird to go from Peggy Carter and then Scarlet Witch to a completely new character that then all of a sudden Doctor Strange is showing up and bringing her in on something that we still don't really know about. Kind of feels weird. If you're going to have all of this start connecting, why would it be different characters? Why wouldn't it just be Scarlet Witch showing up and finding her? Or is this Doctor Strange not working with her? Like, there's a lot of questions that it raises that I'm sure will be answered, but I feel like it's being more confusing than it is like getting me excited to see what's going to happen next with it. Also, I'm not entirely sure if this is the same Doctor Strange from the first season, the one that destroyed his universe because he became too powerful. But I think that's about it for this one. Overall, it's fine. It just, the message once again gets bogged down because the writers think that they're doing much more than they're actually accomplishing. There's this sense of self-righteousness in the writing that you can really feel whenever you get into stories like this and they start talking about things that happened in the past and changing things that happened in the past. It gets a little muddled and frustrating to witness. With all that being said, those are my thoughts on these last 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future What If reviews. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of other reviews on there as well as some Let's Plays, so check those out if you have time. But until next time, hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you all later. Peace out.